Struggling to discuss sex and intimacy with your partner?
Not feeling met, seen, or heard in your relationships?
I'm Janelle.
And I'm Andrea. We're two midlife mavericks sharing our own experiences.
Messy AF and no regrets.
With marriage, divorce, polyamory, and pleasure.
We've learned that when you're brave enough to figure out what you want and ask for it,
with partners, friends, family, and most importantly, yourself,
you'll feel more alive and free.
Question everything, especially your mother's advice.
There's no rom-com formula for this, but don't panic.
Being alone matters. Honey, I can't miss you if you don't leave.
What if your breakup could be your breakthrough?
Our podcast is for brave hearts.
Anyone who seeks or has found the courage to confront their fears and limiting beliefs about breaking societal norms in the spirit of finding their truth.
If you're seeking permission to be brave in your relationships
and want to feel less alone along the way, we got you.
So I loved interviewing Dan Jedynak, our couples therapist, about talking to your partner about sex and intimacy. He was like, his whole energy was so soft and slow and embodied that like it was a soothing conversation. Just that it was incredibly soothing and reminded me it can't be about me, it has to be about the we.
I agree, and I loved his examples. They were so they hit me so viscerally when he would give examples of tone of voice of, oh, here's one way to say something or versus another way, and how one way was blaming and one way was inviting. Mm-hmm. And I really loved how he focused on leadership, right? In order to talk to our partners about sex and intimacy, it requires leadership because we're in a groove, and if we want to get out of the groove, we have to do that together.
Yeah, and then there was such a playful example when he talked about talking to your breakfast. Can you talk?
Yes, which we're not going to tell him any. Yeah. We're not going to say any more about. You have to listen to the whole episode of Bravehearts.
But you have to talk to your breakfast as you prepare to talk to your partner about sex.
He also gave examples of, and it's okay if you don't know exactly what you want. Just knowing that you want something different was another takeaway that I took from him. And as long as you're bringing curiosity and a sense of discovery to what's is possible.
Let's go down the path together and figure this out. That's what he said. Okay.
Yeah. So here we go, Bravehearts. We're going down the path with Dan Jedynak.
Beautiful.
Hey, Andrea.
Welcome to Permission to be Human, Bravehearts.
We're excited for you to be here today. As we've evolved for the past 2 years, 75 episodes, we've realized the most common theme across Permission to be Human is learning to be brave in relationships. It's all about that.
And we know what you want because across our in real life Braveheart conversations across the last 6 months, they have revealed some very common and very fascinating questions.
So we've decided for season 3 that we're going to spend our time answering these questions in a really deep way.
So every 3 months, we'll pick one question, and across 12 episodes, we will interview experts, we'll interview each other, and we will interview Bravehearts so that we can be and learn actually to be brave in relationships, one crisis, one late night conversation, and one celebration at a time.
This format is inspired by our Braveheart coaching model, and we want to bring the permission and depth we offer to individual Bravehearts to all of you, our listeners.
And the first question that we'll cover, as you may have heard, is, drum roll please, how do I talk to my partner about sex and intimacy? Turns out a really common question that lots of people are struggling with. So we're pleased on this episode to present our first expert interview. So Dan Jedynak has a deep passion for life. Music, movement, and connection are what keep his soul alive. Love that. He's worked with individuals and couples through somatic approaches to help them break free of unhelpful patterns and step into a more empowered, harmonious relationship with themselves and the world around them. Dan's work approaches healing as having two essential parts: healing from the past while increasing emotional resilience and strengthening the empowered self. It's somatic therapy with an emphasis on empowerment. Dan, we're so excited to have you here. Welcome to Permission to Be Human. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here and talk about all of this. Yes.
So perfect. So my first question is like, what excites you about this topic, and why did you want to be on the podcast?
Yeah, there's an inherent edginess to this topic. It's very human. It's very relatable. And I think there's a way we can all, or, people that feel that can be united in this sense of like, this is edgy.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we figure this out together? And that's like a lot of what inspires me to explore this topic on my own, explore conversations around sex, and to talk about them.
Mm-hmm. So,
Dan, I've got a question for those who don't know. What does somatic mean when you talk about like somatic therapy? Can you just give a definition of what that is?
Yeah, very simply, it's working with the body. It's the mind-body connection. Yeah, it's like feelings, they arise from the body. It's a way of getting more in touch with the body, ourselves. And I think a key to this topic too is desire. Desire is very body connected. It's not necessarily just a mind process. So
yeah,
yeah.
that definitely taps into a lot of what we talk about in the podcast, the mind versus the body. We spend so much time in our minds. I probably spent most of the time in my mind for the first, few decades of my life. And tapping into your body is another thing. I just want to first acknowledge how you said, like, this is an edgy topic. And I love that you just embraced that from the beginning, right? Because it is an edgy topic. And God, how can we make it a less edgy topic, right? How can we make it just, just like how can we normalize it? Because it is a conversation we probably have to have a lot. Because a lot of us are having sex and a lot of us are with partner or with a lover. And I love that you called that out right away. So thank you. So the mind-body connection, I love that you mentioned that. So as part of your somatic work, can you speak a little bit to how you help people get out of their mind and into their body?
In my work, starting with a one-on-one frame, often when someone is speaking, the body is still informing what's happening. And so if someone is talking, maybe they're moving their hands, maybe their head is moving, their spine is moving. And part of what I do is help cue the story into the sensations that are happening at the same time, the emotions that are happening. It's a way of, in the present moment, connecting the dots. And what happens in the body, it's like a doorway into the unconscious. So it lets you know the self more when you know that, okay, maybe I'm talking and my spine is straight and my stomach is vibrating. Like there's a sense of aliveness coming from that, as opposed to, talking from a different posture or being more contracted, and which both are fine, but it can be so healing to have awareness of these processes.
So I think I'm hearing you just like say that as you're talking, just starting to notice like what's going on in your body and how you can connect that to what's being said.
Yeah. And part of it is we can't necessarily discover it on our own at first. Otherwise, we already would have. And that's part of why I believe somatic therapy exists. It's people that have studied for years and years to learn how to connect these dots. And then what I love about this work is the healing doesn't just happen in a session. It's a way of life. It's learning, oh, here's this way that I can actually oh, I'm seeing how this person is helping guide me in this present moment. I'm learning, it's like learning a transmission of body mind connection. And then it integrates into life.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing this is
The same
it's a life
thing.
practice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then the same thing can happen with couples, with not just learning your own cues, but learning how much you can actually read subconsciously from the other person. So with my couples work, it's more that. It's how is eye contact affecting the present moment? How is body language affecting the present moment? So a similar thing, like open the doorways. Tone of voice is a huge one. Yeah.
And I noticed in some of your work, you talk about tone of voice quite a bit, like the vocal cords and the quality of those, and even talking about the throat chakra. Can you tell me more about how that's a part of your work?
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to conversations with your partner. Um, yeah, the way that we bring in, say, a question or bring in the topic of sex, um, it will have a different impact with depending on how we're there and we're present with them. And it's of course like words matter too. Um, but even just an example like saying, uh, I want to talk about our sex life is different than like, I want to talk about our sex life, right? There's like a different aliveness. Like it comes in a different way, a different kind of inviting. And again, it's like having awareness of the power of the subtlety of that can go a long way.
Beautiful. I love that example. Like that, there's a subtlety of so different, and yet like, and just so subtle. Janelle, did you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I love tone of voice for me is something that really can get me activated and learning how to, yeah, like feel it in my body because the other like it might be that the person's saying it a certain way, but it also is my own story of what I'm putting into that tone of voice. So it goes both ways, right? Is that would you agree with that, Dan?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
So how do you
absolutely.
take like how do I take that story out, right? When it's like been there for so long and it's in my head and I'm like, I think of sex this way. Sex means this to me. Like, is there kind of is there a prep I can do before that conversation or before any of these conversations to help me kind of step out of that past dynamic or story?
I like to think about it as like to make right and relationships have grooves. And these grooves can groove pretty deep of patterns, relational patterns, and that can involve intimacy and sex too. And it really takes being a leader to get out of a groove. There's a lot of inertia there. And not only is if someone in say a couple wants a shift around sex, not only are they changing their own pattern, but I believe it takes a willingness to be a leader into in inviting the other person to make a change too. It's almost like two people's inertia there. So yeah, there's a way it's like that takes a lot of
Yeah.
courage. And I think recognizing like yeah, recognizing the innate challenge I think can be helpful to bring some compassion to the process in general. Um, And then I think a second part is if change is wanted, what is the change that's wanted? It's one thing to say, uh, why is our sex life so boring? Right? There's something, there's kind of a one part system there. There's a finger pointing that happens a little bit. And it's very different if, right, maybe that hints at a desire, but what really is the desire of change?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like yeah, what do you want more of? What do you want less of? Is there an idea of what it can look like? Did some book inspire something new to try, right? Like almost having to really embody that leadership, like having something to bring,
Mm.
not necessarily just naming that it's off or wrong.
Okay, I've like
Mhm.
so many questions. So I want to talk about the desire, but first you said something about a dynamic and the grooves, right? Which is like this. I just can very much relate to this, and that I feel like coming home to myself and my husband coming home to himself. I have said it's become a phrase I've used a lot is like that we repaired a damaged dynamic that was established when we were in our 20s, right? And so I think it sounds like you're saying like it takes both people to say, okay, like we have to get out of this groove. And if only one person is doing it, it, like you can lead, but the other person has to be willing to follow, right? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and even if there is a leader, yeah, it takes both people. And I think same with being a leader, right? I mean, some of this is easier said than done, but that you're not going to necessarily lead by blaming the other person either,
I've
right?
never heard that. Lead by blaming.
really, is that a good way to start? This totally worked for me.
And it could be so sneaky. It's amazing how sneaky it can
Yeah.
end up in the
Right?
communication.
Mhm.
But what it's like to really be a two-person system. I love calling
Mm.
it what is the we? How do we think of this as a we? And we are
What is
getting
the
there.
we?
Mhm.
Love that. But so like, yeah, I love this two-person system. But you spoke about desire, and that Janelle, it just sort of reminds me of you. Um, and I think there's what something that she taught me a lot about, and we learned together was like, okay, great, yes, like I need to talk about my desire, but shit, I don't know what I want. And so sometimes it feels like it has to be a prep step before that conversation to figure out what you want. So how do you do that?
Hmm. Yeah, like sometimes it is inspiration. Sometimes it's a book. It's being willing to Google, I don't know what I want in sex and I want something, right? And really letting it be your own discovery. Um, and right, so that's one thing. There's the like willing to own the discovery and some of it, yeah, there's definitely different ways to go with this conversation, but there's the body component too. What does the body desire? And sometimes we learn that by even asking our own bodies or noticing like, I've noticed in sex, I like really slow, light touch instead of, or I have a preference for that right now over hard and firm. And right, it's like, okay, recognizing that. And then how do I really understand what this is showing me? Right. Our bodies have so much wisdom for what we enjoy and like. And so even letting our everyday experience tell us what we desire.
Can you give an example um, when you say our everyday experience of what we desire? Like how our like another example of how our body's communicating that. Because what my guess is that most of us actually are not listening to our body, and that's why we don't know what it's saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it can be. I mean, it's happening all the time in terms of, are we tired? Do we need to rest? Are we hungry? And do we eat? Or are we eating based on a clock of time? And I think the more that we pay attention even through the day, um, the more often we train the body mind connection to recognize. Um, yeah, yeah, same here. I think there's a lot of directions to go. I think even having a self embodied, uh, like sensual exploration practice. Like, what's it like touching your own body? If you touch your arms, notice what you like with your fingers. Is it slow? Is it fast? Um, yeah.
I love that. I remember talking to my stepson actually, and he's 30, and he was saying, he's like, the power as a man to be guided to touch yourself was really life changing for him, because he had conditioned himself that touch only really came from another woman, from a woman in his world. And so the idea that, oh, his own touch could actually be informative and nourishing was really quite revelatory. And it was revelatory for me too to hear it that way, because it actually applied to me too. But I love that he said it specifically coming from the male perspective.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, it's not something you hear about often. It's almost radical in a way
Mm.
without talking about it like this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Dan, can you tell us like some common missteps that people make in communicating with their partner about sex and intimacy, and like how they can avoid those? Are there some things you see again and again that you're helping people unlearn and learn?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is where it can feel like the one person system. I'm in this alone and I have to figure this out by myself and I'm not getting
Mm.
help.
Mm.
When that is like the sneaky mentality versus really a trust and belief that we can grow. I think a lot of it has that foundation. And yeah, even questions like why isn't our sex better, or why do we never have sex? That yeah, there's something in that that's like there can be a subtle blaming in that. And right, it's like, oh, it's me against something that's happening.
Mm.
And it very much can relate to this very common dynamic that happens all over the place of one person is pursuing something, and but maybe it's got a flavor of criticism in it, or I want something to change, or there's an intensity, and it very naturally polarizes a defensiveness to it, a withdrawing, a like, oh, oh wow, I thought things were fine, I'm being attacked. And then in that defending, it's actually creating more disconnection. It's creating more pulling back, which is the opposite of really the deeper intent. And then all of a sudden there's this cycle of disconnect. And instead this like two-person system, the we system, it really takes a willing to own that every groove takes two people to be in that groove. And that there can be a sense of like an example might be, we don't have sex that much, and I realize I'm contributing to that reality,
Mm.
and I'd like to shift that and feel more alive. I have some ideas. What do you think? Do you want to like, let's talk about it? Right, there's this we and this ownership that gets to happen, that it's like our words can also create the we, invite in the collaboration.
I just felt in my system when you like that one, like that phrase that you just said, oh, like I'm noticing this and I know I'm a contributor, and I would inviting us to change, right? Like I just felt in my system like such an invitation and an appreciation of, oh, okay, like the it's not all on me, right? That, oh, it was really impactful. I just like, it was such a visceral experience in my body.
Mhm.
There's just like such a softness to it, right? Like it's just like, oh, like so I like you. We could have used you like I really like years ago. This would have been so good, so much better than the polytherapist we had. I have to say, like that, she was fine, but like not like this. Like this is really good. Uh, so how like why does it take? I guess like the question that comes up for me is, oh, why does it take so much courage to do that? It's like so much easier just to accuse, or not mean to accuse, but to say like, eh, aren't we having sex? Like, Not that I didn't do that, but I think there's a subtle otherness. And so I guess it takes a lot of courage, is what I'm hearing.
I really believe it takes courage. It's also right, like ideal, and there really can be an easier, like a sense of, okay, it's one thing to say it, easier said than done. And there's a reality where with trigger and tension, um, there can be a feeling of like we're being hijacked by our own triggers, right? And I think with this, the ingredient to slow down always helps, slowing it down. And I think like even before a lot of this, spending time with the desire, spending time with the vision of where it can go. It's almost, it's the pre-work to the conversation, I believe, can really ground the process.
Mm. So when you say that, like spending time with the desire, for someone who doesn't know what their desire is, like what they're kind of fixated on is they know they don't feel fulfilled or satisfied. And there's so now you're naming, okay, but there's a desire there, then what's that desire? So now they have to like go into themselves somehow, whether asking Google or looking at movies or reading books and poetry or something that is inspiring a feeling inside them. and and then is there more to it than that? Is it to take shape? Is it to write about it, to journal about it, to become how to get more embodied in it before to ever even ask them for what they want?
Yeah, I love that question. It feels like there's like a bridging of the gap there. Um, yeah, I think like writing about it can go a long way. Um, right. And sometimes even the desire, right? If we want, say, something new, we don't totally know. Maybe there's just a sense of something to try. So even if the desire is a shared exploration into, a certain flavor of intimacy, just to see, it's like the interest is there enough, right? You might not know yet from experience, but there's something in you that's like calling for it, wanting to try. And then it gets to be like an exploration, right? The same thing that can be finger pointing and cause a break can be like, hey, look at this path. Let's go. We've never been here. Let's like grab my hand. Let's go down this path.
Mm.
See what we find.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sounds so
Yeah.
soothing. It's just like just a totally different frame. I just want to I'm hearing you say less me, more we, um, and that by inadvertently finger pointing causes polarization, causes defensiveness, and then causes disconnection. And I think those are just important steps that I'm recognizing as you're talking about them. Like, oh yeah, that's what happens, right? Just in like 5 seconds, right? The tone, someone's like, I'm being attacked, like mentally pulling away. And so my question is like, is there something that I guess it's just like concrete tips and techniques, right? So I just heard you say like writing about your desire beforehand, great. When you're in that moment and you get that and you feel a trigger or you feel something in your body, like, is there a way you recommend to come back um, that you can practice in the moment so that the conversation can kind of ground or stabilize?
So even awareness beforehand of these kind of push-pull cycles can go along the way. And that, I think that's one of the powerful pieces of couples therapy, is two people can learn together that, oh, sometimes we get into these cycles that are more about the energy and even like inner wounding rather than what we're trying to talk about. And then they can be spotted together. And that's something I help people see too, is like, I mean, sometimes even naming it, like, oh, this is a cycle, or okay, we're in a pattern, we're in a disconnect. And even just that can help pop out of the system. And from there, it might mean like, oh, okay, we're doing that thing. Um, I just need to walk around the house
Mm,
a bit, like do some push-ups, take some breaths, like a quick break
yeah.
to come back. Or, right, part of it is what is, yeah, there might be different realities of what's needed. It could be as simple as, yeah, I just need a few
Mhm.
breaths. Oh, right, not the cycle. Let's do the we thing, right? It can even be that simple, depending. But it's new grooves. And again, like new grooves take time.
Uh-huh.
So even that, the compassion in the process of
Mhm.
it takes time.
I love that.
Yeah. But simply put, slowing down, taking some breaths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Janelle,
What I heard was curiosity. Like that was one of the big invitations. So of it's okay if you don't know what you want, and the willingness to be curious about discovering, and as you said, like walking down the path together, holding hands, doesn't mean you're going to like the view at the first overlook, right? It's like, oh, we're here. We tried this thing. I don't really love it. You might or might not love it, but let's keep going. What else is out here? Right? I mean, I think that that is a fear that I have had
Mhm.
at different times of, oh, I'm supposed to know what I like, and that means I'm going to like that thing for the rest of my life as well. Like the weight of what I like means I can never change my mind again.
Yeah. It's a continuous discovery. And also I think, right, with the we system, even if sharing desires comes from a place of, oh, let's explore this desire together. And yeah, like do you want to do this with me? Yeah, it can be so amazing to bring in the curiosity intentionally, to ask questions. Yeah. Like how do you want to feel during our sex and our intimate moments? Or yeah, what were some like highlight moments that we've had in the past, like harvesting from where we've been, right? And
Mhm.
so even, right, it can be bringing in your own desires and a curiosity to like almost like water the the garden of that mindset in the
Mm.
relationship.
Mhm.
I think I'm also hearing that hasn't been said yet, but seems like it's true because there's like we keep talking about sex, right? Which sex is sort of traditionally, are we talking about like penetration? Like really, I think what we're talking about here is like it can be just touched, right? It's like, and so would you say you like end up broadening your client's definition of sex, or does your client's definition of sex change over time?
People's definition of intimacy and that space in general can change quite a bit. Yeah, because like even just as an example, there can be a whole other exploration if there's an intimate or sexual type of exploration where it's not about penetration, it's not
Mhm.
about sex. And yeah, I mean, even just to plant a seed, like uh what if we don't have sex this time and see what else happens? If, even just to see, we take that off the table, what else shows up? And then, right, I think even in there, there's an embodied definition of, oh yeah, sensuality, sexuality, intimacy can look these different ways. It can take other pathways, maybe from the a familiar one that
Mhm.
repeats.
Mhm. Mhm. Dan, obviously you're, individual and couples counselor, teaching these skills. Do you have any examples that you can share either from a client perspective or from your own life where, you've had some wins or maybe even some losses as you've like, okay, because what we try to tell brave hearts is that this is a brave journey. None of these skills we learn overnight, and so that they're all practices.
And they're messy often.
I think it's just a very sensitive topic in general. Money and sex, two very sensitive topics. And sometimes they're avoided for a reason because they're so sensitive. And even a couple that does really well most days and around most topics, bringing this up can just really, really get to deep pieces and parts of shame and past experiences. So sometimes it can feel like going backwards before going forwards when the topic is really, like actually brought with vulnerability. And I would say the most common thing is forgetting the two person system and going into the one person system. Like that. I mean, it's so common in relationship for that to happen. And even people that know it and have been practicing that mindset for years, forget. But I think part of it is coming back to it again, back to the we.
Is there anything that like we haven't talked about that you feel like you often touch on in your work, like that's always coming up, or that you feel like is really important when talking to your partner about intimacy and sex?
This can even touch into practice later, but I think, more of the sense of like practicing, even just bringing like what it takes to bring the conversation, to start the conversation. I think that's such a key moment. Like, what does it feel like in your body? Is there, like, is someone really in their anxiety? Is they're talking about this? Or are they in their like sense of, can you feel a belief that like, change is possible? This can really work, right? The mindset and the belief brought into the conversation can really help. And I think it's underlooked at how much how much work and intention that can take beforehand. And I think with that, like, come ideas that help with that is like writing desires down, like spending time, like even as a solo practice, like really fostering, what's wanted here. Like coming into the conversation as a leader. It can include, personal somatic therapy in general. Like I think it goes a long way. Somatic therapy can kind of help someone be more aware of not just their inner states, but their impact. Or just practices like that, like very like reflective practices to have more understanding of like how to use our voice and our energy to invite.
What I'm hearing from that is before we even start a conversation is to go inward first, to really get clear on what it is that we're desiring. Even if what we're clear on is we don't know what the thing is, we just know we want something different, and so we want the opportunity to bring curiosity and discovery to something. But then what I'm also hearing is some of us don't have the training. I did not before all this, that we are communicating in lots of ways besides just our words. Our words are one part of communication, but so is how we're holding our body, and how our energetic body is also communicating. And if we've never paid attention to those things, and I think all of those equal the somatic piece that you're speaking to, then those pieces may be actually the greater contributor to why there's a disconnect than we've ever realized.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And even just to get scientific for a moment, our prefrontal cortex is processing information at, at some speed. Actually, I don't know how to measure that speed, but our animal brain is picking up so much more information than even what we're consciously understanding. And there's a 10 times faster processing speed. It's that like lightning fast reaction. That's our animal brain. And we pick up threats around our environment. And that can even include a look of disapproval from our partner, or a contraction of their face or their shoulders, and that's registering way faster than we even recognize, if we recognize it at all.
Like, do you have different tools for different stages of life, or is it all really the same?
Yeah, I work with all age ranges, and I think, yeah, I mean, it's really all the same. Human bodies are human bodies. I think, yeah, with different couples, definitely there's different tools that stick in different ways. Some really noticing the somatic is like, yeah, a couple will really link on to like, wow, even just noticing the things I never noticed before is setting us free. And for other people, more of the mental of, oh, there's a pursuer withdrawer push pull cycle. And how do we spot that in the energy? It's more like the energy of the words, even rather than what's happening somatic. So a lot of that is adjusting to uh, the way the couple orients. But I see, yeah, I wouldn't say I see a pattern with that around age, honestly. Yeah.
Do you have a particular assignment for Brave Hearts, for, thoughts about like where to start if they're really at this point? Should they prepare and try? Should they come see a somatic therapist? And what would that journey look like?
Yeah, I think so much of it depends on homework and how much a couple is willing to, like, if we get through a session and something is harvested that's really helpful, like, do they remember this every day in between sessions? I think has a huge impact. I've seen people change their patterns and awareness very fast in, a handful of sessions, and other people long time,
Mhm.
months. And I think part of it is um yeah, a willingness to look and to
Mhm.
practice. Um, and in terms of practice, yeah, I think besides the relationship itself, like really like practicing being in the desires, practicing your own embodiment of desires and conversations, like um, practice hearing the words come out of your mouth, like like even like talk to your breakfast. Say you're cooking eggs, and you've got your eggs cooking on the pan with butter and onion, and you say, I want to get you so hot. I want to flip you over and put you in my mouth.
Love it. Oh my God.
Right? Like try it out. Like hear it in your voice. See what it's like to
You're
speak
making
from
love to your
this
breakfast.
place.
I cannot wait for breakfast tomorrow.
I'm like, what am I gonna do with my chia pudding?
And I mean,
As my chia pudding slides across my tongue, what is happening?
yeah, right. And yeah, absolutely. And I'm being somewhat
Yeah.
playful and not fully realistic. Like if you're talking sexy to your breakfast and your partner's sitting at the table with your 4-year-old, like that might not improve your sex
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
But for real, like practice in the car. I legitimately practice my voice in the car all the time. Whether it's like singing, that's a separate thing, but also like, yeah, like trying on a
Wow.
conversation, trying on what I want to say, and hearing it in my voice, hearing it vibrate in different parts of my body? Am I like stuck in my throat, and is it contracted? Or is like my chest vibrating, my heart and my body vibrating with what
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to say? And yeah, I mean, this, yeah, connects to somatic awareness, somatic therapy, and also just like playing around with your own body.
Dan,
Yeah.
I have to ask what I should have asked in the beginning. Like, what brought you to this work?
Yeah. I'm just a relational nerd, relationship nerd. It's just, yeah, connection is so rich. A big part of my life. Um, yeah. And like before learning it and teaching it, I had my own, I would get caught in cycles. I mean, I think most people do until they're aware of them. So I think, yeah, my own healing journey, my own mind body connection journey. I love the aliveness of couples work and the like depth
I
and
love
truth
it.
of individual work. Yeah.
I love that you actually brought in play at the end and had us both, belly laughing, because that I think is a big part of, like, when we're stuck on something, we suddenly become so serious around it.
Mhm.
And how can we bring play in any part of our life? Any part of our lives feels relevant, and then especially in this topic. I mean, really, the egg example I just had. I was like, oh, he's really going there. Wow, okay.
He's not afraid.
And I'm aware that I say so much in my head, right? And like the idea of actually saying it out loud to myself is vulnerable. Like I'm aware. I'm like, oh, so imagine if I got to practice hearing myself, hear my own voice, and then do that enough times so that when I'm ready to speak it to somebody else.
Yeah, I love that nuance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Janelle, you just seem always playful. Like, playful is like you are in your head, but you're so playful. Like, this is, I was going to say, the eggs, I can totally see you doing that in the morning with your cacao.
I might even do a little like social media post. But don't forget, right? Like I was the person who cried. I've cried and cried and cried around these conversations around sex and intimacy for that was my journey. There was like poking and blaming that I was doing for sure, but it was also like hurt and shame and sadness and rejection and all of that was coming out of me as well. So I had a hard, it took a while to bring playfulness back in an area that I felt there was insecurity and sadness around.
Yeah. Dan, thank you so much for being on Permission to be Human. We just so enjoyed this conversation.
This is me too. This is so fun. Yeah, what a joy. Thank you.
Is there any
And Bravehearts, if you want to find Dan, you can find him in our show notes. And look him up. And actually I just want to ask Dan, do you work with couples in person or online or both?
Both.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
amazing? All right. Thanks, Dan. Bravehearts.
Hey, Bravehearts.
Love you. Hey, Bravehearts. Looking for permission? Work with us. We offer Braveheart coaching. Follow us on Instagram. Meet us in real life at a Braveheart conversation. Subscribe to our newsletter. Do all this and more at our website, permissiontobehuman.live.